running 32 marathons in 32 days in 32 counties. Okay, so not all of us have done that. None of us has ever attempted even one marathon. So to think that somebody who's done 32 is a fair achievement. Top done that, he's also done 10 Ironman as well, one after the other. He was 21, I think, in the competition. Only 3 finished, and Gerry beat the last competitor by 19 hours. Not enough, he's also written a book which has been a bestseller. But most importantly, he's my favourite cousin.
I'm in a room surrounded by my favourite cousin and my favourite auntie is here somewhere. I wasn't asked to be here, I was told to be here. So anyway, 20 minutes, I know the clock is ticking, so we get straight down to it. I'm going to talk about 5 things. 5 things that have helped me to run 32 marathons in 32 consecutive days and get faster, not slower. 5 things that have helped me to do a DECA Ironman challenge. On the right hand side, just the equivalent of 10 Ironman triathlons, where the shortest day was 15 hours of endurance, so 4 times physically harder than the marathons themselves. And to run my business. 5 things. To do all of these things. That's the beauty of them. If you're looking for rocket science, you're not going to get it. If you're looking for rocks of common sense, but I'd love to think that you might realise that that's what I'm talking about. The event that Anne-Marie mentioned, obviously people can equate a marathon, but in terms of the other event, it was the equivalent of swimming that distance from Dublin to Drogheda. It was the equivalent of running from Belfast down to Kerry, and equivalent of cycling from the airport, Dublin Airport to Malaga Airport. I think I must be the first person ever to win an event. There's no ambitions to go back and defend it. But anyway, enough of all that. 5 things that have helped me to do those events, but also to run my business. I've been self-employed for about 10 years, and 4 years ago in my own business. And in that event there, I got a stress fracture on the 7th day. In my business 4 years ago, I got a far more painful stress fracture. These are 5 of the things that I tapped into. The first one is this: think time. What is think time? While we all know the things we should do, or we all have goals or ambitions for our businesses, do we actually stand back and think about it? Do we give, think time, I believe, can be 10 minutes, it can be 10 hours, or it can be 10 days. 2 very quick examples where it didn't work and where it did work. 4 years ago, my business was really starting to go south in terms of turnover. I met a friend of mine for lunch and he said, why don't you go into this business as a sideline? So the next day I invested 20,000 euros in a technology product. And 6 months later I sold half of the product that I bought, and the other half was already obsolete. It was a ridiculous decision that I made. I had no rational thought process whatsoever. I just reacted wrongly. I didn't have think time. Think time can be 10 minutes, can be 10 hours, can be 10 days. A year later, the turnover in my business had gone down even further. I said, you need to think about where you're going now. You can't be making irrational decisions. So I stood back, I got in my car, and my partner was in the back of the room, and we went to the west of Ireland for 3 days. Think time. Now that I made 3 huge decisions that were rationally thought about, rationally focused on, goals that were realistic. One was to go back to college, to re-educate myself. Another one was to begin writing a book, which thankfully I've written. And the third one is to begin to develop a public speaking module for my business, which thankfully I've since kind of gone further down that road. And that's the benefit of think time. 3 huge things, but I rationally thought about them and realised that I could do them. And then not things I could do, things I subsequently have done, because the difference between could and will are a million miles apart. So that's number 5. Number 4, if you really want the secret of how to raise your standards of business, I believe it's fundamental. You can have all the skills in the world. I heard a gentleman speaking downstairs about the fact that you can have all the degrees in the world, but there's so much more to running a business or to achieving whatever goals people in this room want to achieve. You can have to perform a task, you can have all the skills in the world. You will not perform that task without 2 more things. One is the motivation to do the task, and the other is the energy to give you the motivation to do the task. So my next one is this: it's be fit, or get fit, or whatever level of fitness you're at, raise it by 1%. When you get there, raise it again. Continually work at this, and look at what you're eating. And it's an absolute fact, and people might say, what's that got to do with business? Everything. It's got everything to do with business. Everything. Your body is paying attention to every single morsel of food you're putting into it. Everything you do when you're working here requires mobility. The fitter you are, and it's all relative to everything in the room, the fitter you are, the greater your performance will be, and that's an absolute fact. If I gave you a Ferrari tomorrow morning, I'd like to think the first thing you would do is say thanks. But the last thing you would ever do is willingly put substandard oil or petrol into it. Now, Ferrari is a very expensive transport vehicle. Our bodies are priceless transport vehicles. And we're in them every minute of every waking day, every day, but we're demanding things from them. It's paying attention to everything. Believe me, it is. John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States. If you want a good reason to take up or to raise your standards in physical exercise, JFK said this: physical fitness is not only one of the keys to a healthy body, it is the basis of a creative and dynamic intellectual activity. That's what it does. It unlocks the mind. I was once upon a time 4.5 stone heavier than I am today. 4.5 stone, smoking 30, 40, 50 cigarettes a day for 10 or 12 years from the time I left school to my mid-20s. And then I realized just by introducing 3 miles of exercise into my life every day, it completely changed my whole life. Thankfully, I've never ever forgotten it. My next one, and I know the clock is ticking, my next one is this: in terms of whatever goals you want to achieve, I have a very simple philosophy I live by. When I wanted to run 32 marathons in 32 days, I read a book. I was inspired by a guy that had done something very, very similar. So I surrounded myself with that knowledge. When I wanted to do the DECA Ironman, at first I thought the distances were a mystery. How on earth can you run these crazy distances? But then I found a guy within a week on the internet that had done it. So my absolute golden rule for whatever it is you want to achieve, if you were in the IT business and you're running a business here locally and you want to find somebody, or you realize that there's somebody out there that's doing what you do, simply that's it. Just find somebody who's doing what it is you want to do. And you don't necessarily have to speak to them. But I guarantee you, even sending them an email, I know for a fact Chris Brogan was speaking here today simply because somebody here had the foresight to send him an email. This guy is an icon as far as I'm concerned. I'm very familiar with his work. He's an amazing man. There's millions of people following Twitter, and one of the people on the committee here just sent an email. Find somebody that is doing whatever it is you want to achieve. If you want to run a marathon, just go and model yourself and send you the time you're doing. If you want to become the best coffee shop owner in County Monaghan, just go and find the best coffee shop owner somewhere else, and maybe model yourself, and then maybe learn from them, maybe surround yourself with the wisdom of what it is they've achieved, what principles or what strategies have they got. The best example where I think this has worked irrefutably is find somebody who's doing it. In I'll speak what that guy is like. In 1991, Ryanair was within 10 days of being closed down. It's now the most profitable airline in the world. Tony Ryan was within 10 days of closing it down. And he said, okay, what am I going to do here? So what he did was, when he picked up the phone and he rang Michael O'Leary. he said, Michael, go and look at the books, come back and tell me what to do. And 3 weeks later, Michael came back. And what did he say? He said, shut it down. He said, it's never going to make money. And Tony said, well, hang on, while you were doing that, he said, I have found somebody that is doing what it is we want to do. I have found an airline in the world, on the other side of the world, that is making huge profit every week. And this was in the summer of the First Gulf War in 1991. And the man he found was that man there, Herb Kelleher. Find somebody who's doing what it is you want to do. Tony Ryan found a man that was running the biggest airline in North America, Southwest Airlines. And so he sent Michael over for 3 months to shadow him, to learn from him. That's all he did. And Michael came back, and it's no secret also that not only did Michael come back and said, I now realise it can be done. I've been shown a way. All we have to do is, if we model ourselves with this guy, we can turn it around. And what's more, I don't want to be your accountant anymore. I want to go in and run that airline. Give me 1 year to prove to you that I can turn it around. So Tony agreed. And Michael took this one stage further. It's no secret that Herb was this crazy CEO that used to jump on the side of airplanes with no shoes on just to get himself in the papers. So Michael just did the exact same thing. The next one, counting down, so that's number 3. Number 2, you already have demonstrated that you have this. Every one of you has given up a Saturday to come to realise that we can all learn from each other. I do this all the time, whether through internet, Skyping, or through just looking at different things I did, or through attending. Some of the best ideas I get for talks or at events like this. I'm actually going to prove that to you, because I'm going to show you in a video in a second that I actually saw the talk a year ago under a completely different capacity, but I thought it just fitted brilliantly into the next thing I'm going to talk about. Wherever you are, if you go into a town like Monaghan and there's 5 coffee shops in a town like Monaghan, why is it that one of them does better than the others? Or why is it that, if you're an insurance broker down in Limerick and there's 20 insurance brokers, I was speaking recently and there was 50 insurance brokers in the room, and I was well briefed by the insurance company beforehand. They said 45 of them are really, really having a very challenging year. This was in December. But I was told that 5 of the people in the room are having their best year ever. So what's the secret? The secret, I think, is this, or one of the strategies that you can bring to your businesses is very simply this: be different. Just be different in your approach. Be different in what you do. And you might say to me, you know, well, how can you be different? Well, that's up to you. I can't tell you how to run your business, but I can tell you it's so easy to do exactly what everybody else is doing. So in reality, it's actually even easier, I believe, to be different. A couple of examples, and this is, I guess, you know, smaller. Like I'm a very small business owner. This is it. This is what you get. But in terms of, I think some really good small business ideas. That is a thing that I took a photograph of about a month ago. Of you know, a very high quality in terms of on the street, very well presented. But we've all seen 50 of those. You've never seen one like that. All that is a guy or a lady, I don't know, being different in their approach. Very, very, very eye-catching. If I own any shoe shop owners here, maybe in the shoe shop business. No, okay. If I owned a shoe shop, there is a shoe shop owner, is there? Okay. Anyway, I won't put you on the spot. But if I owned a shoe shop, I would be modeling myself maybe on this because I saw this in America. That's just a shop window for a shoe shop. Very catchy. If you're in a business and you know you don't want to have a sale, but you want to have a sale where you don't give any money off, well then there's a great idea. But very eye-catching. Very eye-catching. So it is. You might say to me, but Gerry, I don't have any money for marketing. I don't have any money to be different in my approach. You do not need money. You do not need a single cent. I'm going to give an example of a man who a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago at this stage, because I've been telling this for quite a few months, by simply being different in his approach, he completely transformed his business. Like my business was 3 or 4 years ago, his business was significantly challenged. I'm not going to tell you what the business is. It'll be obvious to you because he's going to talk to you now for about 1 minute and 40 seconds. This is a guy being completely different in his approach. He didn't ask for a single cent. All he did was embrace digital media. Every Friday night, he still does it. He puts up a funny video on YouTube. But the last 30 seconds is when he gets his key business messages across. I hope the audio works in this, but this is just a guy being different in his approach. Let me see. I know we have it goes down. If we show it, take it out.
How are you? Welcome to Know Your Sport, Part 7. Where today we're talking about that wonderful sport of running. Now we've had some great runners right throughout the years in this country. Sanyo Sullivan from Cork, and John Delaney I think was another one, and Eamon Coughlin, all great runners. Now I like to run cross country or indeed on track as well. You have to have all the right gear. Dunlop shoes, Adidas blue clogs, and a white top as well. And make sure that you do some proper stretches. Because stretches are very important, otherwise you'll tighten up and you can do some damages. So we get the stretches underway and away we go for our jogging. Now it's very important when you're jogging to keep your nutrition up. So I like to have a couple of snacks when I'm jogging. The first ones I like now if it's hot during the summer as well, I like to have an ice cream. Water's good as well. Oh, jeez. Now, just let you know what's happening in the hot day. Of course, tonight is Friday night. Tomorrow night, of course, is Saturday night. And we're going to have music, hopefully, with the help of God. And of course, then on Sunday, we're back to our traditional Irish. Slow down, camera woman. On Facebook, www.facebook.com. That's almost it from this week. Our apologies, we weren't with you last week, but I was in court.
Just kind of being different in his approach. Publican in the west of Ireland. And last July, he heard a bit of commotion outside. And he walked outside, and there was 50 American tourists getting off a bus. And they walked into his pub, because they'd seen him on YouTube. His business has gone through the roof. You might have seen him on Republic of Telly, recently. I'd love if you write this down. And I'm not saying I came up with this, I didn't. I heard it at a talk, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. What is business? What is business? Business is this. Business is the exceptional execution of an ordinary idea. That's all it is. That's all business is. It's the exceptional execution of an RD idea. How well do you sell what you sell? Why do 5 insurance brokers have their best year ever in 2011, and 45 of the same people in the same room from the same geographical area are having a very challenging year? I suggest, I was speaking recently in Cork Park to 96 referees and find somebody who's doing it. I got the collective ambition in the room was that they all wanted a referee in All-Ireland final in September. And I said, there's 7 people in this room standing in front of me now. I said, we've already done it. I said, if I was one of you 89, I'd be getting a telephone number, or I'd be asking one of those people to mentor me, because they've already done what it is you want to do. Business is simply the exceptional execution of an RDA. The number one reason for businesses not succeeding, this is my one, okay, is the lack of a second idea. That's all it is. The lack of a second idea. And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and go into a completely different business. Maybe he's still a publican. He just came up with a new idea, that's all he did. Just come up with a new idea. The last one, I've given you 4, the last one is this. But again, everybody just stand up for a second. Just stand up for a second. The reason I got you to stand up is for 2 reasons. Number one is everything that we do every day requires energy. If you were feeling yourself flagging down, literally just stand up, get out of the chair, go outside for 1 minute. I guarantee you it will completely change your state of mind. What do you think the most important one is? Anybody want to hazard a guess what the number 1 on the screen is? It'll make complete sense to you when you see it, but anybody want to hazard a guess?
Breathe.
Breathe. Pardon? Breathe? Breathe, well, yeah, okay, breathe does come in. Yeah, okay. What else? Anything else? Energy?
Show up.
Energy?
Free time.
Free time?
Just show up.
See shoes. Number 1. A set of beliefs or way of thinking that determines your behavior, your outlook, and your mental attitude. It's most important. Whatever story you're telling yourself is your story. And if you feel that story is not working, you can change your story. Literally like that. You can, it's a fact. You can actually do it. General Patton was the leader of the US Army. If you think business is a battle, he said if you're going to win any battle, you must make the mind run the body. Never let the body tell you what to do, because the body will always get up. It is always tired, morning, noon, and night. But it is never tired if the mind isn't tired. I was speaking recently to a different group of insurance brokers, and I asked the collective wisdom of, it genuinely was a different group. I asked them, what was the collective wisdom of how many, there were life insurance brokers. And I said, what is the collective number of insurance policies that you think is a fair number that you could all consider? What's the general consensus? And the figure to come up with was 8. 8 policies a month. That was a collective average of all the people in the room. I said, right, put your hand up if you believe without a shadow of a doubt that next month you can sell 15 policies. It's about 40 people in the room. 5 hands went up. About 40. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to ask you the exact same question again. Put your hand up if you believe without a shadow of a doubt you can sell 15 policies next month. Or the alternative is that you and all the people you love are going to die. Put your hand up if you now believe you can sell 15 policies next month. 40 hands couldn't get up quick enough. Mindset. They decided they were going to tell themselves a completely different story. All of a sudden they could see areas that they could completely achieve this goal. All of a sudden it seemed a very insignificant goal. And that's the power of the mind. That's the power of the mind. I'm not sure how we're doing with time.
Yeah, we probably should.
Right, okay. I'll finish with one story. So we're roughly 3 or 4 minutes, so I'll give the story justice. I'm going to show a photograph of a man in a second, a man called W. Mitchell. I surround myself with people. One of the things I talk about, I'm only giving you 5 things, lots more I could give you, but I want to give you what I think are really 5 powerful things. I surround myself with great people to achieve goals, something I talk about a lot. I didn't do those events on my own. I didn't. I could. How can you run 30 marathons, 30 races? You're lucky enough to raise a lot of money for charity through the help of 2,500 people. That's how many people was involved in the 30 marathon challenge. With the DECA Ironman challenge, I had 7 of a crew with me for 10 days. I average 16 hours a day. How can you do that all on your own? So I talked about surrounding yourself with great people. And one of the people I surround myself, I've never actually met the guy, but he's a role model, and I surround myself with his influence. I know a story intimately, a man called W. Mitchell. And in 1971, he was in a motorbike accident. And most of his fingers were, 70 or 80% of his fingers were burnt off, and most of his face was burnt off. And when he came out of the coma, he said, nothing I can do. He said, I can't go back in time. He accepted it instantly. I said, I'm going to look forward. And he said, okay, I'm going to look forward. He knew he had at least a year of rehab ahead of him. That's as much as he had to look forward. But he realized there was nothing he could do about something that happened 10 seconds ago. So the only future was looking forward. And he said the one thing that kept him going was the fact that he said, right, now I'm going to do something that I'm really passionate about and get my pilot's license. That's what's going to motivate me to completely rehab to the best of my ability. And so for a year, maybe 2 years, I don't know exactly, but he rehabbed. And he went and he got his pilot's license. And 6 months into that part of his life, he was out flying solo one day. And he crashed. And he was left paralyzed for life. 1973. Paralyzed for life. He said 2 things that have absolutely stuck with me since I heard the story about 6, 7 years ago. He said, before these accidents, he said there was 10,000 things I could do. Now there's 9,000. He said, it's not what happens to you in life that matters. It's what you do.
Thanks very much, everybody. Ruth, would you like to say a few closing remarks?
Gerry.
So I guess 10 minutes for questions.
Not the back of the room, sorry, yes.
Hi there, Gerry. First, thank you very much for coming. This is my 8th seminar that I've heard today, and you're all fantastic speakers. But if I only heard yours, my day would have been worthwhile. So thank you for that. I'm like you. I've it's a while since I've done exercise, but what you make sense to be fitter helps you in business. What would you suggest a fellow who's 53 next month, several stone overweight, could do to start? There's no point in me joining the gym. I know I'll have given it up by next week. There's no point in me getting my Adidas running for the marathon. How could I start the best way to get myself fit for business and life?
Well, one thing I encourage people to do a lot is walk, for starters. Walking and swimming. If somebody said to me, what are the one or two that I can do and that are really, really good? Walking and swimming. Walking is the simplest thing in the world if we're looking at the health to do it. And one of the things I remind myself of every day, I talk about gratitude a lot in my health. I can guarantee you, I think about gratitude 50 times a day. So I remind myself, if I don't, like every night Jacinta wants to go for a walk, and I'm not a walker. I exercise at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And every night I have to really get out of a comfort zone to go and walk. But the one thing, apart from Jacinta telling me I'm going for a walk, is gratitude, and the fact that I know for a fact I will come back feeling at least 1% better. So people ask me, why do I run? I run for fitness, I run for fun, and I run for business. How did I start? Like, I've been lucky enough to run 30 marathons in 32 days. The first time I ran, I went and I ran 3 miles. So every journey starts somewhere. But you are, whatever you're telling yourself you are, that's what you are. If you tell yourself tomorrow you can go for a 10-minute walk, you can. If you're telling yourself you can't, well then you're absolutely right. So that's the power of being able to write your own story. In terms of, I would encourage you to sign up for some kind of an event, whether it's a 5K or whether it's a 1 mile walk, it doesn't really matter. But to sign up for it, to register for it, and then to tell somebody about it. Because if you tell somebody about it, even if you buddy up with somebody, just motivation with each other. You know, like I know for a fact the workload of this event was shared because there was 15 people on the committee. So it was, and that's the power of surrounding yourself with other people. So maybe you can, and realise what it'll do for you in every aspect of life. Because, you know, I asked mine yesterday, what's your passion? He said, my family is my passion. And he came to me for health advice in terms of fitness. And I said, when you're in an airplane, I said, your child is beside you. Have you been on an airplane recently? He said, well, when we have to come back from holidays. I said, the air steward definitely said one thing to you. And I said, what was it? He said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. When the oxygen mask drops down, do not put that oxygen mask on the child until what? You're no use to anybody if you're not here. So that's not a good enough motivating factor to get you to do it. You know, to realise. But also, people say to me, you know, why do you do all these crazy work? I genuinely run for business. I get up a half an hour earlier on a Monday morning, just because conventional wisdom will tell me if I'm lucky enough to survive Monday, You know, then I can start work on Tuesday. But if conventional wisdom tells me that, surely I can choose to completely tell myself a different story. So I get up a half an hour earlier on Monday and I run a little bit further for business reasons. That's why I do it, particularly on a Monday. I always run on a Monday morning for business reasons. And it focuses me, like most people know, I'm self-employed. You know, so, but I would encourage you to do that, to definitely sign up for an event that you know is going to take a bit of work, because nothing worthwhile comes easy. You know, so if you have to get out of your comfort zone, it's all the reason to do it. But it also must be realistic, and I would imagine a 3 or 5K run. If you really want to motivate a factor, do it for charity. You know, even if it's only raising 50 or 100 euros. I was lucky enough. A phrase I use a lot is small keys open big doors. 8 years ago, I'm lucky enough to be a triathlon national champion now. 8 years ago, my brother rang me and he asked me to take part in a triathlon. I said, "What's a triathlon?" I didn't even know what it was. And he had to ring me 3 times to encourage me to do it. And the last time he rang me, he said, "Do it, Gerry." He said, "It's for somebody that's not as lucky as you. It's for a cancer charity." And so that was when I realised, my mindset changed to realise that I was lucky enough to get to do a triathlon to help somebody that's not as lucky as me. And I was at the same triathlon this morning, ironically. It's the Fighting Cancer Triathlon, a brilliant event. And so maybe that might just motivate you that little bit more. Okay, thanks a million.
What is your diet like then? If you said you'd be conscious of everything that you put into your body, what is your specific?
Well, I had a coffee. The first thing I did when I came in here to see you. And the reason I tell you that is because at the end of the day, life is meant to be enjoyed on your own. I do love coffee. But what you do every day is far more important than what you do once in a while. And I'm away a lot because I do a lot of talks. And one thing that intrigues me is I stay in hotels a lot and that kind of thing. And I always see people in the breakfast rooms, they all go for the fruit. They go for the melon. And then they come back with this huge thing of melon. But I would be almost certain that if I went back to the fridges of those people in any of their houses, the chances of me finding melon would probably stick. So why can we do it then and not do it then? So what I'm saying to you is it's simple things, the little things, it's the obvious things that we all know. But I think by having a balance on it, 80-20, like we were in an Indian restaurant last night, you know, trust me, I love food that mightn't necessarily serve me well, but 80% of the time I'm fueling to be at my best, and I mean in every aspect of life. And I just, you know, it's what I talk about in terms of fueling for performance. Your body's paying attention to everything. And it could be as simple as instead of 5 cups of coffee a day, can you get it down to 4? When 4 becomes normal, you get it down to 3. Or could you introduce one new vegetable into your diet? It is genuinely simple things. In fact, they're so simple, we just don't do them. Or sometimes we start, but it's continue to motivate ourselves. That's the secret. And that's, I have a phrase that I use a lot. It's when you're at your weakest, you must and you can choose to be at your strongest. So I use that in a lot of different ways. That answer, hopefully.
Well, is there anything that you particularly exclude or include?
Oh, sorry. Sugar, I don't take sugar really, a tiny bit of sugar. I do a lot of juices and smoothies and that kind of stuff, definitely. It's a great way of getting vegetables. But like I'm not a fan of celery, but I throw it into smoothies, or sorry, juices. So I would definitely, you know, instead of a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock, is there something that you could bring that might serve you better? It's simple things, it really is. In terms of, you know, I used to drink an awful lot of coffee, and now I kind of try and limit it to the maximum 2 cups a day. So I do believe breakfast is 100% the most important thing for me personally, because that's the foundation. That's like, you know, getting into your car with 10% petrol and expecting it to get you to, you know, from here to Cork. You know, what you do is you fill the tank early in the morning, and then, you know, it'll serve.
What would you have for breakfast?
Typically, I would have.
That's great. She's planning on doing a marathon. Maybe 33 of them, but.
I won't get away with any lies out of it because Jacinta's in the back room. But typically, I would have had 1 or 2 things for it. Either organic porridge with lots of seeds, milled seeds, goji berries, that kind of stuff, and honey in it. Because porridge is grand, but you can put a rocket fuel into it. And, you know, I would have a very small portion of porridge, but it'll be a huge bowl with him finished because of all the good stuff, rocket fuel that you put into it. Udo's oil I find great as well. In terms of, if I don't have that, I have a mixture of different wheat-free uses because I have a bit of an intolerance of wheat. So I try and stay away from wheat breads and oat spelt flour and that kind of stuff. One of the best things I ever did, funny enough, about 3 years ago, was I went to a food intolerance person. I ran it in County Monaghan, from Castlebane. some people in the room that they won't talk about. And I went into the room and I said, this lady, I knew 8 things. I know my body so well. I said, if she picks up on any of these things, this lady knows what she's talking about. She picked up the 8 things. So I knew that there was definitely, this was a seriously good thing that I could do. And she picked up every single one of them. And so I tried 80% of the time to pay attention to that. You know, so simple as that. That's not the marathon.
Harriet, when you go back to the fella that used to smoke 50 bags a day and was 4 stone overweight and all that, were you still forward looking as you are now? How did you come to be this forward thinking, forward moving person that you are? Where did that come from? How did that start?
The most unmotivated, zero ambition, didn't realise that life was about growing. Happiness, I've learned, comes from 2 things. From growth, growing as a human being, and from contribution. And Jim Stein's, I'm sure everybody knows who Jim Stein was, I read something recently that he said, life is about one word, challenge. You must challenge that, because that's really living. And as soon as I took up running, I got physically fit, I got mentally fit. That's when I really, instantly I got it. And I'm not saying that I created any of this at that time, because that is nonsense. It's simple things. Physical fitness gave me the mental capacity, or mental fitness to go back to college in the late 90s, to open my own business in the early 90s. And it definitely gave me the physical fitness. There was 3 or 4 things that definitely happened. One was a photograph to get me to lose weight that I saw. Another one was going back to college and just realising, God, I did really well in the exams. And in school I would have felt that I was very poor academically, but I did really well in these exams relative to my ability. And then I opened my own business, got a great shot of confidence out of that. And then I started saying, God, look what you've achieved. What else are you capable of achieving? And about a year into opening my own business, I confronted my #1 fear, the biggest fear in life ever. And I confronted it. And if I hadn't been physically fit and in turn mentally fit, I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. And ironically, I talk about the importance of doing things that you're passionate about or that are important to you to the best of your ability. And formerly I used to have 5 things in that, and now I have 6. And the 6th one was forming my, you know what it is, was my biggest fear in life, which was public speaking. Biggest fear ever in my life. And I did it to give people an idea of how big of a fear it was for me. I had to give my first talk in public in 2004. It's what I do for a living now. 2004, the first ever talk in public. I was so scared, I had to go to a hypnotist to give me the courage to speak to an audience of 4 people. That's how big of a fear it was for me. But I got such a shot of confidence out of that. I said, right, what's next? And then I said, right, best of my ability, I love to run. I wonder what standards I can reach in that. So I said, right, I hadn't done a marathon, that's it. I said, I'm going to go and run a marathon. Then when I did that, I said, right, give me something hard. And I kept raising my own standards. You know, so maybe.
Gerry, I was speaking to you earlier there in the corridor, and we were talking about the talk you gave in the 4 seasons before Christmas. We talked about what Gerry had achieved up to that date and what the next challenge was for Gerry. I wonder how far are you on with those challenges that you spoke about?
My ambition, yes. My ambition now this year, people are asking me, why aren't you doing another event? For 2 reasons. Number one is I'm clever. I know I'm not fit enough. I'm still, truth be told, recovering from the event I did a year ago this week. And I'm very conscious to listen to your body. That's why I think I've been lucky enough to have achieved goals, because I listen to my body. In terms of things that I'm passionate about, I love business. I absolutely love it. Apart from my partner in life who's in the back, I love her, of course. Number one. But I love business, and I'm very ambitious business-wise. And I've identified some very 32 marathon standard goals in business, and one of them is I want to go and speak in America, not just once, but I want to develop a whole business out there in terms of speaking. So it's all very well, desire is one thing. How am I actually going to make it happen? I've already made connections just by asking questions of people. You know, it's amazing how small a world it is if you just ask the questions. By just picking up the phone and asking one phone call, I managed to meet a guy that's one of the biggest people in the Irish-American business network in America. And I sent him a message about 6 weeks ago and said, is there any chance that I could chat to you over Skype? Here's my idea, I want to talk in Boston, and he was based in Boston. I said, sure, I'm next week, why don't we meet up? And I met him. And now he's actually working on developing a project for me over there. You know, so there's no secret to it, you know. A friend of mine set up a business in 2010, and in the first 18 months, he turned over 1.6 million in a bakery business. And I asked him recently, I said, what's the secret? And he said, you have to get out and ask. It's not going to come to you. You have to go and make it happen. You know, so that's what I'm trying to do in terms of business.
You're speaking on challenge, and I was just listening to the radio, I think it was 3 weeks ago, guy of a sport I never even heard of running backwards.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, let me go try this. And I ran around, we don't have big yard, but I ran around that. I was surprised how easy it was. I was thinking I'm going to fall over that. The guy was explaining how.
Garrett is the name.
Yeah. And how just the insight and how the brain just works and knows what you're doing. And said, tell your body basically what to do. But have you ever got it?
I've tried
But he said actually you get it's more like you get fitter better by running backwards than you forward. And he said you can run faster backwards than you can forward.
I've done a 3:32 marathon backwards, which is staggering. I met the guy, I don't know him personally, but I met the guy. I know he's done 3:32. He's done a 39-minute 10K backwards.
You seem to be just coming out all the time that the Germans is the best to do it.
Yeah, I know.
Now the Germans have such an autonomy.
But here's the interesting thing about that, and it's about, just in case somebody at the back of the room didn't hear, it's about an Irishman that runs backwards, and he runs marathons backwards, and it can be done. 30 marathons in 32 days should be impossible, but it's not. And doing that DECA Ironman challenge, I actually did think, I thought it was a mystery when I saw it first. It should be impossible, but it's not. And what he's doing, running in 3:32. So conventional wisdom is a term I use to talk a lot about. Conventional wisdom will tell you that all those things are impossible. But conventional wisdom was a phrase coined by human beings. It was to say what it is. You know, because if we listen to that, well then nobody would ever run a marathon, and certainly nobody would ever run 27 miles. But we know it. You know. And those events that I've been lucky enough to do, all they are obviously things that I love to do and big challenges, but they're simply metaphors. That's all they are in relation to what a standard I think anybody can reach in anything that they want to reach a standard in. You know, obviously, you know, in terms of business or running marathon, whatever it is, all they are metaphors for whatever it is we want to achieve. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Hi, Gerry. Gerry, you talked about the mind controlling the body and taking control of that and changing perspective. Are there any particular tools that you find useful to help or assist with that? Tools such as mindfulness, which there was a talk on this morning, or NLP, or even some of you talked about needing to be hypnotized to give a presentation, maybe some sort of trans-state tool. Is there anything in particular that you've found useful over the years?
Well, I'll give you two examples. In the DECA event, and just I guess paint a picture, the DECA event I was lucky enough to be involved in last year, which is swim, cycle and run, I was an average of 16 hours a day for 10 days. And so we get into the lake, which we up at 5 to eat to get ready for the swimming event. So in the lake at 5 to 6 every morning. And the earliest I finished was on day 1, which was 20 minutes before the 9 o'clock news. That was the quickest, so I only got slower after that, like all the other competitors. And there's only so many hours in the day, by the time you an hour to come down off that, get to bed, up an hour before. So we were surviving on 3, 4, 5 hours sleep a night, and we just got more and more tired. But two things that definitely stick out, and one of them related to the hypnotist, was something he taught me. When I went to the hypnotist about the public speaking, he said, "What time is the talk at?" And I said, "It's at 3 o'clock. And he said, "What time will it be finished at?" And I said, "It'll be finished at 4 o'clock. He said, "Focus on 4 o'clock." He just said, "Just focus on successfully doing what it is you want to do, but just imagine yourself walking out of the hotel and realize that the world is going to go on like this." That's how insignificant, obviously for me, but insignificant it is in the overall scheme of the universe. So on the DECA event, I used to think all day, no matter what happens, no matter how much pain, and it's all relative, because this was an ambition, so I have to respect that. And I said, no matter what happens, I focus. I said, I'm definitely going to be back in the camper sometime before midnight tonight. And I used to just imagine just a nice cup of tea that I was going to have. And believe it or not, it actually worked, but a far even more powerful one, and it's something I've used in business quite a lot in the last year. And I'm going to patent this, because I think it's brilliant, but it worked for me. And it was this: on the 3rd day of the event, everything about this event was the number 10. 10 Ironmans, 10 days. And the cycle that we had to do was 160 miles every day, which was 11.6 miles of a loop. So it was 10 laps. And for the first 3 days of the event, on lap 6, I went into a bad place. I'm not saying depressed, but I got really low on lap 6 for the first 3 days, because one part of my brain was saying, "Gerry, you've already swam. You've been up since 5 this morning. You've already swam for an hour and 50 minutes. you've already cycled for 4 hours, you still have to cycle for another 4 hours at least, and then you have to go and run a marathon, and then you have to do it again tomorrow. And I got really low on the 6th lap, roughly around 1 o'clock every day, because I knew it was at least 10 o'clock before I was going to finish. And on the 3rd day I said, you cannot keep coming back here, hitting this low moment, because so much of this event was mental, you know. And you know, in terms of training, I peaked at 31 hours. The first week I did 96 hours, the first 7 days, so there's only so much. So at some stage it has to be up here. And I said to myself, you cannot keep coming back to this point. If you do it, you're not going to finish it. People were dropping like flies in this thing. And I said, I came up with an idea that I think is brilliant. Somebody else might think that's ridiculous, but trust me, it worked for me. I said, everything about this event is number 10. You're trying to get from there to there. That's the journey you're traveling. You cannot get to 10 without passing through 6. It's impossible. Because by its very definition, you have to go through 6. And all you're doing is passing through. And this event was meant to be hard. That's why you're doing it. If it was easy, the place would be thousands of people doing it. It's only 20 people at the start. I said, you cannot get to 10 without passing through 6. And realise it's the phrase I use earlier. It's when you're at your weakest, you must, and you can choose to be at your strongest. And I tapped into that mindset every day, and it actually worked. It really did work. So now if I'm going through, you know, in terms of my ambition to speak in America, you know, it's going to be tough days. I'm going to be sent those 6 lap days between now and next Christmas when I'm going there. It's going to be real, but it's not meant to be easy. If it was easy, you know, the flights would be full kind of thing. So, you know, that's what I've signed up for. It's the same challenge. And, you know, just by harnessing that and realising, okay, tough days, just power on through because there'll be greener days ahead. So they're simple things.
Okay, we'll take one more question. The other group is going to join us and then we're going to wrap up.
It's not a question, it's just on your resources. There's a fantastic book by a fellow called Matt Hudson called The Saboteur Within, which teaches you to overcome your subconscious mind and all that sort of stuff. Everybody should get it.
Saboteur mind.
Sorry, Saboteur Within. Saboteur Within. You can love me after this.
Okay, so thank you very much, Gerry.